Chapter 17. Nothing. Days and night went by with no sign of the old man. The townsfolk formed search parties, the police were called out, and Jack even made a tearful appeal for his safe return on the local news. Nothing. On the boy's instruction, all the highest points for miles round were checked. The top of hills, roofs of any tall buildings, the church spire of course, even electricity pylons. Nothing. Jack designed a missing poster for his grandfather. He'd hundreds photocopied at school and trundled round town on his trike, sticking them up on every tree and lamppost he could find. Still nothing. Every time the telephone or the doorbell rang, Jack would race to answer it, praying it would be news about Grandpa. But there was no trace of him. The boy felt terribly guilty and would cry himself to sleep at night. His mum and dad told Jack not to blame himself, but over and over he wished that he had listened to them. Perhaps an old folks' home really was the best place for Grandpa. At least he would have been safe there. Though the boy hated to admit it, it seemed Grandpa was now far too much of a handful for the family to look after. As each day passed, the sense of absence grew deeper. Yet after a while, Jack realised something awful. The world kept turning. His mum and dad went back to work. The people of the town returned to their lives. A missing old man had become old news. Most of all, it was not knowing that was agonising. Had Grandpa gone forever, or was he lost somewhere in desperate need of help? Reluctantly, the boy returned to school. It was hard to concentrate at the best of times, but now Jack's mind really was elsewhere. Whatever the subject, all he could think about was his grandpa. After school every day he would stop up at Raj's to see if there was any news. Ding went the bell as Jack entered the newsagent's. It was now all week after his grandfather's disappearance. "Ah, young Master Bunting, my favourite customer. Coming out of the coal, please," called Raj from behind the counter. In such a low mood, all the boy could muster was a polite nod in the newsagent's direction. "I scoured all the newspapers again today, but I am sorry to say there has been no sign of your grandfather," said Raj. "I just don't understand," replied Jack. "When he went missing before, we always found him. This time it's like he's disappeared into thin air." Raj mused on his thoughts for a while, and to aid concentration, picked up a lolly from the counter and popped it in his mouth. The man's face grimaced a little. It was clear he didn't like the taste, and he quickly popped it back with the others for sale. There'd been long rumours amongst the kids at Jack's school that many of Raj's sweets came pre-sucked. Now the boy knew for sure. Strangely, it didn't make him like the newsagent any less. "Your grandfather is a war hero," said Raj, thinking out loud. "Yes, he even had a distinguished flying cross," agreed Jack. "That's one of the highest honours a pilot could be awarded. So I cannot believe a man like that would just give up on life. He's out there somewhere. I just know it." Ding. The boy left the shop with a spring in his step for the first time in days. Now at least Jack felt there was hope. The drone of an aeroplane's engine echoed across the sky. Looking up for a moment, Jack half expected to see his grandfather, but of course it wasn't a Spitfire, just another anonymous jumbo jet. Up and away, the boy recited to himself. Raj was right. Grandpa must be out there. But where? Chapter 18. Jiggery Pokery. Day trips were something of a rarity at Jack's school. After a boy had slid down the Tyrannosaurus Rex skeleton at the Natural History Museum on his bottom, the headmaster had banned all trips until further notice. It was only one of a long list of misdeeds committed by pupils at Jack's school over the years. Most had now entered into school legend. At London Zoo, a girl leapt over the wall at the penguin enclosure. She thought that by tugging her pull over her head, waddling and catching her fish in her mouth, she could pass herself off as a penguin. A trip to a Doctor Who exhibition ended in chaos when a number of boys stole Cyberman and Dalek costumes and pretended that they were an alien invasion of Earth. One Christmas, on a school outing to see the local pantomime, 2 pupils stole the pantomime horse costume. They were only found out when several months later they attempted to enter the Grand National. An excursion to an ancient fort took an unfortunate turn when the teacher was fired out of a cannon. He was later found up a tree 2 miles away. On an outing to HMS Victory, a group of boys pulled up the anchor and set sail. They hoisted a skull and crossbones flag and declared that they were pirates. After several months at sea, the boys were apprehended by a Royal Navy aircraft carrier. A day trip to a local farm ended in disaster when the geography teacher was herded into a sheep dip and all his hair was sheared off. It was slightly preferable to the previous year when the pupils had attached him to a milking machine. At the National Gallery, a boy scrawled "Gaz was here" with a black marker pen on a priceless Turner masterpiece. At first he denied it, before being reminded that he was the only boy in the school called Gaz. An outing to the Bank of England ended in disgrace for the school when they realised that £1 million had gone missing. The maths teacher, Mrs. Filch, is still in prison for her role in the robbery. On a visit to the local fire station, the fire chief regretted letting the children loose on one of the hoses. A teacher was propelled into the air by the spray and kept up there for an hour until the water ran out. The school had been banned forever from Madame Tussauds waxworks in London after a couple of boys made off with a replica of Mrs. Thatcher. The next day they wheeled the waxwork around the school on a skateboard, pretending the Prime Minister was on a visit. Despite this long list of offences, Miss Verity petitioned the headmaster to lift the ban. Eventually, she was granted permission to take her history class on a visit to the Imperial War Museum in London. Miss Verity was well known for being the strictest teacher in the school, and the headmaster was sure there would be no funny business on her watch. Jack had been so distracted by his grandfather being missing, he'd all but forgotten about the trip. First thing in the morning, and with his head elsewhere, the boy boarded the coach. Needless to say, before the coach had left the playground, all the kids had scoffed the entire contents of their packed lunch boxes. The greedy little tykes. Returning to the Imperial War Museum was bittersweet for the boy. Jack had visited so many times before with Grandpa, it was like a second home to them. Of course, this was when his grandfather still knew he was his grandfather. As the coach pulled up outside, Jack recognised the museum at once. It was an impressive building with Roman-style columns at the front, a green dome on the roof, and 2 naval cannon pointing proudly aloft in the courtyard. The trip was nearly cancelled before anyone had even got off the coach. 2 boys on the back seat had pushed their bottoms against the window to moon some elderly Japanese tourists. After Miss Verity gave them both life sentences in detention, she made a speech to all the children on the coach. "Now listen up," she shouted over the excited hum. The children were buzzing, having wolfed down all the cakes and chocolate bars in their lunch boxes. They were far too hyper to be quiet. "I said listen up," she bellowed, and there was silence. "Every single one of you will be on your best behaviour today. You are a walking advertisement for the school. If there's an hint of jiggery-pokery, monkey business, or shenanigans of any kind, we're all getting straight back on the coach." Like all the other kids, Jack had no idea what jiggery-pokery meant, but he imagined it might include sliding down a priceless dinosaur skeleton on your bottom. "Now, here are your worksheets," announced Miss Verity, handing out bundles of A4. There was an audible groan from all the kids who were looking forward to the day trip, being something of a DOS. "There's even a sheet for you," she said, as she handed one to the baffled-looking coach driver. "What am I looking for today? Are the 3 F's. Facts, facts and facts." Jack scanned his worksheet. There were hundreds of questions, all dealing with boring historical details, dates, names, places. Jack and his classmates were going to have no time to marvel at the exhibits. Instead, they'd have to spend the entire time reading every sign on every wall and jotting down every last fact. The Imperial War Museum was full from floor to ceiling with tanks, weaponry and uniforms, all from past and present. Jack's favourite part of the museum was the Great Room, where planes hung from the ceiling. It had inspired him to display his model aeroplanes in his bedroom in much the same way. The museum had the most remarkable collection of fighter planes. There was a World War I biplane, the Sopwith Camel, a Luftwaffe Focke-Wulf, and an American Mustang. However, pride of place was given to the most legendary fighter plane of them all, the Spitfire. On seeing her again, Jack's heart began to sing. Somehow, she made the boy feel close to his grandpa again.